Giant Voice, the official podcast of the United States Navy's largest overseas installation, Commander Fleet Activities, Yokosuka. All the information you need to succeed as a forward deployed sailor in Japan. Each week, we tackle one topic and speak to experts who can answer some of your most frequently asked questions. This is the Giant Voice Podcast.
Well, okay, so here we are for another episode of the Giant Voice Podcast. We see that at least some people are downloading and listening to this podcast. So we're pretty happy about that. We've been working pretty hard. Just because of the nature of how things are, we haven't had much of a chance to talk about what this even is or what it's doing. So today we have me. I am Dave Fluellen. I've been your host a few times. We also have the two other members of the public affairs team at CFA who have been hosts. We have MC2 Connor Hotelling.
Hello.
And we have Mr. Garrett Cole.
Morning. Hang on, I'm losing my mic. It's leaving.
You know, we don't really know what we're doing here.
We don't know what we're doing. We're trying our best. We built a podcast studio, and all the microphones are breaking off now.
I was like, why do I keep leaning back further? And I was like, oh, that's why.
So, no varnish. We were tasked to do this, as is with a lot of stuff in the military. We are told by our higher-ups that this is what we want you to do, and you guys execute it. So we've been doing our best to execute it. And we've been taking it as seriously as we can and trying to make something good for everyone at CFA. So I guess what we wanted to do today was introduce ourselves a little bit and say that, you know, regardless of the fact that we were sort of tasked to do this, we want to make it clear that this is for you guys, and we have access to be able to interview pretty much anybody on base or anyone that has anything to do with the base.
I think a lot of this hinges on viewer input or
Right.
listener input?
Listener input,
too.
yeah.
So if you know anything, or if you want to know anything, if you are curious about anything going on around the base, please send us something.
Yep.
We have the email yokosukareport@gmail.com.
Yep.
We are more than happy to receive any sort of input or just any general questions about the base. We'll try to get it and fit into an episode as soon as possible.
Exactly, and you can always reach out to us on the CFA Facebook page as well with ideas for episodes. So again, if, like Connor just said, if there are any questions, anyone you want interviewed, we can bring them in and we can get the answer from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems that people have is not knowing who to talk to when it comes to a situation.
Right.
They don't even know the first place to look, and the internet's not the best resource for anything military.
Sometimes not, no.
So, I mean, there's a couple of sites that, you know, you have to go through, but yeah, I mean, especially since we have the ability to reach out or find whoever you need to talk to.
Yep. And yeah, like you say, Garrett, that's we have a lot of access to be able to get whoever in here and ask them the questions directly. And you know, like the housing episode, which Garrett, you did that interview. You know, that was one that we saw a lot of stuff on the Facebook page about people with housing questions and people with housing issues. And Garrett, I know you tried to ask a lot of the questions that we had seen floating around out there to get answers. So we hope that that was helpful for people. Another one is I did the Admiral with SOFA stuff, and there's always lots of questions about SOFA. So yeah, we hope that stuff helps.
Well, I mean, and a lot of times, you know, people go to town halls and stuff, and they have a lot of questions for the CO or the hospital or everything. But some of the questions that they have, the CO isn't the subject matter expert when it concerns that. I mean, if you're asking him about things at the NEX, he's only going to know so much, and he doesn't have a representative from the NEX there to give you the information that you need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll introduce ourselves a little bit. MC2, Connor Hotelling, you want to tell any of our listeners a little about yourself?
Wow, that's a tough one.
I don't know myself at all.
I like long walks on the beach. Single, ready to mingle? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, my name is MC2, Connor Hotelling. Born and raised Orlando, Florida. Yeah, I kind of fell in love with photography and a lot of the arts that go into public affairs, and I kind of found my way here. So, yeah, not much about me, but
where were you Navy-wise before you came to CFA?
I was on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN 69, for an unfortunate amount of time. We had one of the longest deployments, I think, recorded to date on a carrier. And it was...
During the pandemic, right?
Yes, during the pandemic. So no fun...
How many days at sea total was that?
I think our longest one was 208 days.
That is absolute insanity. So 208 days without a port visit.
And then we got back and then went out again for another deployment.
That is an absolute nightmare, man. Well, we're glad to have you. And yeah, I listened to the interview you did. I edited the interview you did with N9, and that was very good. So yeah, it'll be fun. We're gonna keep taking turns and try and get some different perspectives on Navy stuff. And I think it's good to have a second class active duty in there who can ask questions from that perspective. So Garrett Cole, the one and only Garrett Cole. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So full disclosure, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag here. Garrett was not Navy prior to being a civilian. Garrett was in the Air Force.
Garrett's our wild card.
He's our wild card, which we don't hold it against him. I love the Air Force. And yeah, so why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Garrett?
I may not have been Navy in uniform, but I did work for Pac Fleet for about 9 years. So I got very much immersed in the culture and picked up a lot of words I probably shouldn't say around my kids.
So what did you, when you were in the Air Force, what did you do?
So I came in as a videographer, and then unlike the Navy where they see the value in videographers, I was actually the last videographer to go through DIMFO straight out of basic training.
And they changed it to broadcaster after
in
that.
6 months after I got to my first duty station. And I mean, I've been a journalist since high school, wrote for the paper, and then in college I did it. So the broadcast side was not my cup of tea.
Right.
Absolute stress. I think I got gray hairs from that. Videography, I did have a strong passion for that at first, and then when we stopped doing that, the quality of video products started going down when we started doing these 1.5-minute stories. So once I got to my second duty station, my first duty station was actually in Yokota. So I've been to Japan a few times.
Yeah.
Almost every year as to visit after that.
Nice.
But once I got to Oklahoma, I transitioned from broadcast to doing print, which is kind of what I want to do. I was big into Ernie Pyle and Hunter S. Thompson and stuff. So I was like, all right, this is kind of what I want to do. So I finished out my first enlistment. I finished out my enlistment in active duty there, and then we moved straight to Hawaii so that I could finish up my undergrad. And then I worked kind of freelance for a newspaper that was embedded with the Marine Corps base at Kaneohe Bay for about 1.5 years before we found out we were expecting our first child.
Hey.
And then
Congrats.
I needed to have a real job. So that's when I took the job working at Pac Fleet for 9 years, and then went to graduate school while we were still there, and kind of that was actually kind of a challenge when I was working at the newspaper. They said, well, you only have an undergrad in business, so you may not know anything about being a journalist. And I was like, all right, I'll get a master's in it just to shut you guys up. So yeah, I mean, that's always been kind of a passion. I love Even my most recent journalism vice, ironically, is Tokyo Vice.
Yeah, Tokyo Vice is great.
Yeah, Jake's a prodigy. I don't relate to him at all. He is
he's good at what he does.
He's good at what he does. Yeah.
So for any listeners out there, if you're new to Japan, or even if you've been here for a long time, Jake Adelstein is an American journalist who came here in the 90s, I want to say. And worked for Japanese newspapers doing the crime beat. He was the first foreigner to do it, and he wrote a really, really good book that's called Tokyo Vice, about kind of the underground in Japan. Kind of the other side of things that we don't see so much. He actually has a podcast right now that's actually really quite good.
Really?
So,
we should get him in here.
I would love to if we could, but. So he has a podcast right now too that's about disappeared people in Japan. That's very, very good. So he's pretty cool. So so now you and your family you left Hawaii.
There was a thing with my contract, and so for a couple of months I was freelancing and writing for a couple of different publications, and then we had already kind of felt it in our heart that we needed to be here, It was time to leave Hawaii, and COVID hit, so we kind of just got stuck.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, we just kind of got stuck. Japan closed its borders. My in-laws moved out here years ago, and so it was kind of like we were just kind of in Hawaii alone. And about a year later, I applied for the job out here, and then here I am. So
nice.
That's my 2-minute story turned to 20 minutes.
That is something extremely surreal, is that I missed all of COVID. I was on deployment for
you were on the
COVID.
ship, yeah.
So the whole world has this shared experience that I kind of dipped out on. Didn't have any of it. I just had my own equally weird experience.
Yeah, being underway. I had a buddy who used to say, shout out Declan Barnes if you ever listen to this, who used to say being underway is just like a plane flight that just never ends.
Yeah.
That is
like it just feels
extremely
like,
true.
Yes. That like horrible feeling of being on an airplane on a commercial flight, but it just never ends. It just keeps going.
And then they make you a flight attendant. You work there now, and you're like, what?
Yeah. The food's even worse. You have to, suddenly
Gets
you're
gradually worse.
a janitor too. I also remember having a conversation with a guy. We were talking about, a bunch of Navy guys were around, and we were like, what's the worst meal you ever had underway? And I know you were on a big deck, which is a little bit different. I was on small decks, and these are a bunch of small deck guys. And it's like, what's the worst meal you ever had? People are throwing out all sorts of funny stuff. And this guy said, yeah, one time we came for dinner, and it was just baked potatoes. Like, literally, it was just buckets of baked potatoes. Like, that's all
I'll do you one better.
baked potatoes.
I'll do you one better. I was on the night shift, and man, they put out anything they could, because they were kind of in that in between.
Like for mid-rats?
Yeah, it's called mid-rats, where it's in between dinner and the breakfast. It was just peas. It was just peas. Just buckets of peas.
Buckets of peas.
I was pissed, dude. I was like, what the hell?
So as far as me, my name is Dave Fluellen. I was 7, almost 8 years active duty, and then a couple of years reserves as well, Navy. I was a late joiner. I was 29 when I joined. Previous to that, most of my 20s I spent living in Sweden. So I already had kind of an international perspective on things, and I got bit by the travel bug, the adventure bug, and that's why I joined the Navy at first, was to just kind of see more of the world and get paid for it. And I love being in the Navy. I had a great adventure while I was doing it. It was time to say goodbye, I think. I got out on a really good note, but I just felt like I didn't want to do 20. I wanted to do something else. So I got out. My wife, who is Japanese national, and we had our first son in 2017. I was working at AFN at that point. when I left AFN, worked as a freelancer here in Japan for a few years, doing video, audio, some graphics work, stuff like that. And picked up this civilian job last year for the public affairs office here. And it's been pretty fun being back on base and being back around Americans. I hadn't been around Americans for a few years, so that was it was a bit of a culture shock coming back to base, but it's fun. It's I missed the sense of humor, the military sense of humor. It's nice to be back around that. Because, I mean, a lot of people listen to this know, like, sometimes people who've never been in the military don't quite get our sense of humor. So it's nice to be back around.
It's not exactly highbrow.
No, it's not exactly highbrow, and it can be pretty dark. So
pretty depressing.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, the Marines talk a lot about this. It's a big Marine thing. Is they call it shared hardship, right? Part of being a Marine is that Marines go through all this nasty stuff. Like, even when they're not, at war or on deployment, like, being a Marine is not easy, right? They have way more rules and requirements than any other branch. And part of the reason that they do that is all Marines share in that kind of pain and suffering. And so, every other Marine has been through it. And I think, the military in general is like that to a degree. We all kind of have the same off-kilter sense of humor because of the weird stuff that we've
despite what Top Gun tells you, it's not the most glamorous job.
No.
And it's nice to have that support system. It's good.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's a little bit about us. But yeah, to go back kind of to the beginning here, this is not necessarily something we wanted to do or wanted to push. We've been having a pretty fun time doing it. And we're trying to take it as seriously as we can and try to, be a voice for what you guys want answered. So active duty, civilians, contractors, spouses, kids of active duty or contractors, whoever you are, if you have questions, if you have problems, if you need answers, hit us up. Let us know. We will find the person who can answer the question, and we will bring them in for an interview, and we will ask the questions you guys want answered. Let us be, your voice directly to these people, because that's what we're here to do. So, yokosuka@gmail.com. Please email us with ideas of who you want us to interview, of who you want us to talk to. Also the CFA Facebook page. And also I would suggest too, anyone you want us to interview. If you guys just think there's someone cool on base who has a cool story, right? Or that's done something exceptional on base, let us know about that. We'll bring them in and interview them as well. This is a democratic podcast. We want your guys' input, and we will take it to heart. You guys agree?
Yeah. At the end of the day, we just want
just
you
like
to feel
any democracy. If you don't have the people, then there's no podcast. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. We want you to feel heard. That's it at the end of the day. And if you don't feel heard, then there's clearly something wrong. It's a big proponent of what our new CEO is trying to bring to the table too. He wants to make sure that he has an open door policy. He wants everyone who has problems to raise hell about it, as they should. And if you have a problem, please let us know. Let somebody know. As long as someone knows, yep. We'll get to it.
And we'll find the person who has the answers, and we'll ask the questions. Certainly. And like Garrett said, the CO wants an open door policy, but the CO can't answer every question. He is not the subject matter expert in everything, right? So we will find the subject matter expert, and we will get the question answered. So I think that is just about it. This is our little our little episode to introduce ourselves that we hadn't had time for because we had the Admiral lined up and the CEO lined up.
It's a little freeform.
It's a little freeform. But yeah, we just wanted you guys to know who we are, a little bit about us and what we're trying to accomplish here, and that this is for you guys. So please hit us up, give us ideas, tell us about things you want answered, tell us about problems you're having, and let us know. And we're going to try and find answers for you guys. Do you guys have anything else, Garrett?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, really. We're happy that someone out there is listening. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next episode. Adios. The Giant Voice Podcast is a production of Commander Fleet Activities Yokosuka Public Affairs Office. The views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the policy of the Department of the Navy or Department of Defense. Thanks for listening.